I knew I didn't belong at that table, not really, not in their eyes. But I showed up anyway, not for them, for me. I stepped out of the limo. The engine was still running. My heels hit the stone path hard. And when I walked through those doors, every voice in that room went quiet. Vivienne just stared. Camilla blinked like she couldn't believe it. I didn't say much, just smiled, and sat down like I'd been invited all along. Where in the world are you listening from if you've ever been looked down on? Hit subscribe. This one's for you. The first time I met Brandon's family, I wore the wrong shoes. They were nude pumps from Macy's. Not designer, not red-soled. Just clean, safe, respectable. Still, Vivienne glanced at them like they'd offended her wine, then looked at me like I hadn't quite tried hard enough. Her smile was tight. "Welcome, Janelle," she said. "You're very polished. Brandon didn't tell us you were so put together." I knew what she meant. She meant you clean up well for someone like you. The room smelled like old roses and furniture polish, walls lined with oil paintings of fox hunts and pale, unsmiling ancestors. I sat straight-backed in a velvet chair, careful not to touch anything. Brandon squeezed my hand under the table. "Relax," he whispered. "They're just awkward, not bad people." I nodded, but my stomach clenched. Camilla strolled in 15 minutes late, all flowing silk and loud perfume. She air-kissed everyone but me, then turned and said, "Cute bag." "Is that vintage?" I opened my mouth, closed it. It wasn't vintage. It was clearance. "Thanks," I said. She smirked. "Love that." The wine tasted expensive. The food was plated like artwork. Everything felt sharp, from the forks to the laughter. After dinner, Vivienne asked about my business. "You plan weddings?" "From an app, yes," I said. "But it's more than that. We help streamline guest lists, RSVPs, vendor contracts." "Oh," she cut in, "so it's like Etsy meets Google Calendar." I paused. "No," I said softly. "It's a platform, built from scratch. I coded it myself." She blinked. Brandon cleared his throat. "She's already signed a few big-name venues, and 2 investors are interested," he said quickly. Vivienne nodded slowly, then turned to Camilla. "Didn't you date a software guy once? That one with the crypto?" Camilla laughed. Yeah. He made apps too. Couldn't pay rent but had so many visions." Brandon tensed beside me. I felt his thumb move along my knuckle, but he said nothing. Silence. That night, as we drove back to my apartment, I didn't speak. Not until we hit the lights on 6th Avenue. "They don't like me," I said quietly. Brandon gripped the wheel tighter. "They don't know you, that's all." He glanced over. "I love you, Janelle. You're smart. You're building something real. That matters." I looked out the window. Streetlights blurred by. "They don't care about real. They care about names." He didn't answer, just reached over, rested his hand on my thigh. Warm, still, trying to reassure. But my chest stayed tight. They didn't care about potential, only pedigree. They didn't hear what I built, only how I said it, where I came from, what I wore. And deep down, I started to wonder, was love enough? I shook the thought. No answer, just silence and headlights. And that sick, quiet ache I couldn't name. Pause. We weren't even engaged yet, and I already felt like a guest in my own life. Vivienne raised her glass halfway through dinner. "To family," she said smoothly. "To legacy, to good judgment. And to Brandon for always leading with his heart." Everyone clinked. I lifted mine slowly. "But truly," she added with a smile too sharp, "Brandon has always had a talent for seeing the potential in people." She looked straight at me, even when the rest of us aren't quite sure what we're looking at. My stomach turned. The wine soured in my mouth. Camilla leaned in. "I mean, it's kind of sweet," she whispered. "You're like a Pinterest board come to life. Real DIY energy." Brandon's laugh was nervous. He didn't look at me. I set my glass down. The table was long, ornate, too wide for real connection. A cold draft ran under it, brushing my ankles. I could smell roasted duck cinnamon candles' expensive foundation. But I couldn't taste anything anymore. Vivienne kept going. "Not everyone comes from our world," she said, turning to her brother-in-law. "And that's okay. We must be open-minded these days." Laughter, light polite, But I heard the undercurrent, sharp, steady, precise. Greg leaned over to Brandon. So when's the engagement announcement? You've been experimenting long enough. Excuse me, I asked. My voice came out smaller than I meant. Camilla grinned. Oh, don't be sensitive. They're just teasing. Brandon reached for my hand again. I pulled it away. Nobody noticed. They didn't need to. They were done with me. I just hadn't left yet. I excused myself quietly and stepped outside. The cold hit me like a slap. The wind carried whispers from inside, but I let them fade. The stars were bright, but I felt invisible and hollow. The following week, Brandon convinced me to come back. A family catch-up, he called it. More casual, fewer forks. I agreed on one condition. I want to show them what I'm working on, I said. No filters, just the app. Let them see it. He nodded. They'll be impressed, I swear. That Saturday, I brought my laptop and the new beta build. The living room was set up like a magazine spread. White orchids, soft jazz, finger food on marble trays. Vivian greeted me with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. You brought a computer. I wanted to share the platform, I said. I'm launching the new vendor interface next month. Camilla poured herself sparkling water. That sounds techie. It is, I said, plugging in the charger. It tracks contracts, guest dietary needs, seating compatibility. Vivian interrupted. Is it also a matchmaking service? Because we could use that for Camilla. Polite laughter. I smiled tight. Opened the app, clicked. The loading wheel spun, then froze. Brandon stepped closer. Wi-Fi. I checked the bar. No connection. He frowned. That's weird. It worked earlier. Camilla sipped. Dad's always turning off the router when he works. He says the signals mess with his golf swing. I unplugged and tried my hotspot. Nothing. This might take a second, I started. Vivian leaned in. It's okay, dear. We get the gist. Pretty buttons. Very clever. The room felt warmer suddenly. Or maybe it was just my cheeks. I just wanted to show you already did, Camilla cut in sweetly. You're trying. We see that. Brandon stepped toward me. You can try again later. It's not a big deal. But it was. This wasn't some half-baked hobby. I'd built this platform line by line, night after night. While others slept. While they vacationed. While they laughed at people like me. I shut the laptop. Slid it into my bag. Tried not to slam it. Greg came in just then. Saw the screen. Is that a tablet? No, I said. It's a full build. He nodded vaguely. My golf group just got a website too. Very handy, Camilla laughed. I'm sure it's similar. My throat tightened. Brandon placed a hand on my shoulder. Next time, he whispered. I nodded. But I wasn't sure there'd be a next time. Not with them. Maybe not even with him. Sunday brunch at the Alcott estate was an institution. White linen, champagne flutes, everything garnished with sprigs of dill or gold leaf. I wore a cream blouse I'd steamed twice. Still felt underdressed. Vivian passed the croissants with surgical precision. Her nails matched the china. So Janelle, she said, buttering toast. Tell me about your family. What do your parents do? I swallowed. My mom passed when I was 20, I said. My dad's a contractor. Plumbing and electrical. Silence. Except for the quiet scrape of Camilla's knife on porcelain. How practical, Vivian replied. Camilla didn't look up. Didn't you say your father did our pool heater like 6 years ago? Greg chuckled. Well, maybe we'll get a family discount someday. Brandon forced a laugh. Dad, Camilla cut in. So you literally built your business from the plumbing up, Brandon sighed. Cam. No, it's fine, I said. I took a bite of fruit I couldn't taste. The fork was cold in my hand. The smell of mimosas mixed with perfume. Overwhelming. Vivian tilted her head. I suppose that explains your entrepreneurial spirit. Survival breeds creativity, doesn't it? Something snapped. Quietly. Inside. I set my fork down. Brandon looked at me, concerned, still silent. I'll be right back, I said, pushing my chair gently. I walked out onto the patio. The air was thick. Humidity clung to my skin like a second shirt. I leaned against the railing, gripping it tighter than I needed to. My pulse pounded in my ears. Brandon followed a minute later. Hey, he said softly. I'm sorry, that got weird. No, I replied. It got real. He rubbed the back of his neck. They just don't understand where you're coming from. They don't want to, I snapped. He didn't argue. I love you, he said. I'm trying. I turned to him. But you're not stopping them. His face fell. And in that moment I realized every time they jabbed I was the one bleeding. But he never reached for the bandage. He just watched me bruise, quietly, nicely. I stepped past him. I need space, I said. He let me go. That hurt most of all. The silence stretched for days. Brandon texted, called once, left a voicemail I never played. I needed space, but I also needed answers. A week later, I found one by accident. I was sending a calendar invite to a shared email we used for RSVP testing. The auto-suggestions popped up. And there it was. Brandon.alcott@upenhalcapital.com. Subject line analyst role interest. Resume attached. My stomach dropped. I clicked. The message was polite, polished, brief. He was open to new opportunities and excited to explore growth in private equity. Sent 2 days after brunch, before we even fought. I sat still for a full minute, then stood. My knees shook. I didn't know if it was rage or heartbreak, probably both. That night he showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door slowly. Didn't invite him in. He held a bouquet. I didn't take it. I saw the email, I said. His face dropped. Oh, that's it. He ran a hand through his hair. I was going to tell you when I asked. After you got tired of defending me, he sighed. It's just a backup plan. I mean, your startup's still finding its footing, my startup I cut in. Or your exit strategy, his voice rose. Janelle, be fair. You know how volatile tech is. What if it doesn't scale? My chest tightened. I don't need you to believe it'll scale, I said. I need you to believe in me. He looked away, and in that moment I saw it. He loved me, but not enough to bet on me. Not fully, not when it cost him comfort. The bouquet trembled in his hand. I'm sorry, he said. I panicked. I nodded. Then closed the door, gently but firmly. That night I stayed up working. Lines of code blurred as tears fell onto the keyboard. But I kept building. And around 2 a.m. an email lit up the screen. Subject cover story, Modern Weddings issue, from Vanessa Cho, Editor-in-Chief. Hi Janelle. We've been following your work. We'd love to feature your story in our upcoming issue. Are you available to talk next week? I stared at it. Then read it again. Then again. Outside the city was quiet. Inside I finally exhaled. They didn't believe in me, but the world might. And that was enough for now. The morning of the dinner, I stood in front of my closet staring at nothing. Silk, cotton, neutrals, all wrong. I sat on the edge of my bed. Sunlight cut through the blinds in hard stripes. Dust floated. Everything felt suspended. My phone buzzed. A message from Brandon. Hope to see you tonight. No pressure, just dinner. No pressure, but everything pressed on me. My chest, my ribs, my pride. I closed my eyes, tried to breathe. Flashback. Me and my dad 12 years ago, in the garage. He handed me a wrench grease on his hands. Doesn't matter where you start, Jay, he said. Matters where you aim. Back then I aimed just to escape, then to build, then to belong. Now I wasn't so sure. Another flash. 3 years ago, me in a cramped studio apartment. 1 folding table, 1 laptop, 2 rejections in my inbox. Crying into cold takeout. Thinking I was insane for trying to start a company with no safety net. I remembered that hunger, that silence, that fire. It hadn't gone out, just got quiet. I looked at myself in the mirror, still standing, still here, and I said it out loud. No more proving. My voice cracked, but I kept going. I'm not walking into that house to ask for space. I'm walking in to take it. Silence. Then a shift inside me, like steel clicking into place. I picked out the white suit I'd been saving, booked the black limo, emailed the editor back, yes, I'm available, and I have a story to tell. The sun hit my face. It didn't feel warm. It felt like warning. I was done waiting for their approval. Time to show them what they missed. Time to arrive. Pause. For me, not them. I didn't rush. That was important. Everything had to feel effortless, even if it took me 12 hours of planning to make it look that way. I started with the suit, white, sharp cut, tailored last fall for a pitch that never happened. Still had the tags, still fit like it was waiting for this exact moment. I called Leah my stylist friend. I need soft power, I told her. Think Amal Clooney meets You Can't Sit With Us. She laughed. I'm bringing 3 pairs of earrings, 2 clutches, and waterproof eyeliner. Next, the limo. I didn't want to stretch. No neon lights, just black, subtle, but undeniable. It arrived at 6:30, driver in gloves. The leather smelled expensive. I sank into the back seat like I belonged there. Pause. Then the message. I drafted the email carefully. To Vivian Alcott, subject tonight's dinner I'll be attending. Looking forward to an evening of transparency. I CC'd Brandon. Then I added one more recipient, Vanessa Cho. Yes, the editor from Modern Weddings. I wasn't sure she'd show, but if she did, bonus. I texted Rena, my old roommate, and now wedding PR maven. If you still owe me a favor, tonight's the night. She replied instantly. I'll have photographers on standby. No logo, no noise, just presence. Then I breathed, sat back, closed my eyes, visualized the room, the table, their eyes when I walked in. I didn't want to gloat, didn't need to scream. I just wanted them to see what they never bothered to look at. Me, unapologetically, the girl they brushed off, the founder they snickered at, the woman they underestimated. Vivian would wear something navy, Camilla pastels probably to look innocent. And Brandon, I wasn't sure anymore. The car turned up the familiar drive. Maple trees lined the path, leaves just starting to turn. Same estate, same house. But I wasn't the same. I adjusted my cuff, checked my lipstick, stepped out. Cool air hit my neck. The driveway gravel shifted beneath my heels. A staff member opened the door. Music, laughter. The smell of lamb and truffle oil spilled into the air. It was time. Camilla spotted me first. She froze mid-sip, then stood a little too fast, napkin falling to the floor. Her smile stretched thin. Janelle. Wow. You look official. Vivian turned slowly. Her mouth didn't move, but her eyes did. Judging. Calculating. Brandon stood too. Hey, he said, almost a whisper. He looked tired. Or guilty. Probably both. Vivienne was the first to speak fully. We weren't sure you'd come, she said. And in such style. I walked past her, straight to my seat, placed my clutch down like a chess piece. I like clarity, I said. Harder to ignore when it arrives in leather. Camilla laughed, a touch too loud, a little forced. So is this a power dinner? Should we expect a slideshow? Brandon stepped in. She's had some media attention lately, he said, as if trying to protect me, his voice soft. Careful, I didn't look at him, didn't need protection. Oh, we saw, Vivian said. That wedding tech article, very polished. Almost believable. Red herring number 1. She thought I was here for validation. To show off, to win back their approval with press and pearls. Camilla leaned in. I figured you might want to smooth things over tonight, she said. We've all said silly things. Tensions run high before a wedding. Red herring number 2. They thought I came to fix things, to salvage the engagement, to beg for space at their table. I smiled, finally looked Brandon in the eye. Where should I sit? I asked. Vivienne gestured beside her. Right here, of course. Your family, not yet, I replied. My voice steady. I pulled out a chair, but not the one next to Vivienne. I chose the one directly across. Eyes level, no angles. Pause. Rena texted me just then. Photographer got the arrival shot. No one noticed. Want one inside? I replied. Just one. Wide frame. No faces. Just posture. Vivienne poured wine. We were just discussing the Preston Gala. Camilla might bring someone new. I nodded. Sounds like a fresh start. She raised a brow. Maybe for all of us. My smile held. But something inside me shifted. This wasn't going to be a spectacle. It was going to be a record. Not a fight. A fact. I wasn't here to raise my voice. I was here to take my place. Then decide if I wanted to stay seated at all. The table shimmered with candlelight. Silver reflected back at me. And in it I didn't see a guest. I saw the woman they'd tried to edit out. And failed. Dinner dragged. Lamb was served. Some root puree. I didn't touch mine. Camilla talked about a new brand partnership. Vivienne asked Brandon about a board seat his father was arranging. They spoke around me, not to me. It was familiar, predictable, expected. And then I interrupted. I brought something, I said, reaching into my clutch. 4 heads turned. Even Greg, usually silent, looked up. I pulled out a folded sheet, printed. Simple. Black and white. Vivienne frowned. What's that? The cover mock-up, I said. For the next issue of Modern Weddings. I placed it between the wine glasses. Let them read the title, From Planner to Powerhouse. How Janelle Carter is Redefining the Wedding Industry. Camilla blinked. You made the cover? I nodded. Vivienne's lips parted. Nothing came out. Brandon reached for the page, hands slightly trembling. There it was. My face, my words. No filters, no edits. I didn't know, he said quietly. You weren't supposed to, I replied. Silence. You're going public, Greg asked. I looked at him. I already did. I turned to Brandon. I emailed you the draft last month. You never opened it. His jaw tightened. I thought you were still revising. I was, I said, but not the article. Pause. I reached into the clutch again, pulled out the engagement ring, set it down. Gently, no drama. I think we both know this isn't the table I belong at. Brandon stared at the ring. No one else moved. I didn't come here to prove anything, I said. My voice didn't rise, didn't crack. I came here to return what doesn't fit. Vivienne exhaled sharply, but didn't speak. Camilla looked stunned, not angry, just exposed. I stood. The chair didn't scrape. I'd angled it carefully. One of the servers opened the front door just as I reached it, like they knew. Outside headlights glowed. The limo was still waiting. My heels clicked across the marble, each step louder than anything said that night. I didn't look back, not once. I didn't have to. I didn't expect him to follow me, but Brandon did. Halfway down the steps, I heard the door open behind me. Janelle? Wait. I kept walking. Please? I stopped. Slowly turned. He was standing there under the porch light, still inside the threshold, like he wasn't sure which side he belonged to. The cold brushed my collarbone. But I didn't move. He stepped forward. You didn't have to do it like that. I tilted my head. Do what, Brandon? Leave the ring you stopped defending. He flinched. That's not fair, isn't it? I cut in. He looked down, hands in pockets. His voice was tight. I was trying to keep the peace. I laughed, sharp, quiet. With who, I asked. Your mother, your sister, yourself. He didn't answer. The wind picked up. Leaves scratched along the stone path. It sounded like whispers, or memory. I didn't know how to fight for you, he said. I was raised to stay neutral. And I wasn't, I said. I stepped closer, lowered my voice. I was raised by a man who worked with his hands, who taught me to speak when silence feels like betrayal. You watched them mock me, dismiss me, and every time you just stood still. He blinked fast, his jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. Good, I was done arguing. Vivienne appeared in the doorway, Camilla behind her. They didn't speak, but I saw it, the shift. For the first time, they weren't sure I'd crawl back. And that terrified them more than anything I could say. Vivienne called out soft but clear. We can talk, Janelle. Woman to woman, I smiled without warmth. You had 7 dinners and 3 brunches to do that. Pause. She stepped out, heels clicking gently. You have potential, she said. Now she saw it. Not when I was broke and building. Only now when the spotlight found me first. And you, I said to her, have always had perfect timing. She flinched just slightly. I turned to Brandon. Tell your father he was right, I said. I wasn't one of you. I stepped back toward the limo, but I wasn't done yet. Not until she knew what I really came for. The driver opened the door. I paused, turned back to face the house one last time. Candles flickered in the windows, the dining room still glowing behind those tall French panes. But it felt distant now, like a memory I no longer belonged to. Vivienne stepped closer, only one step. Enough to smell her perfume, sharp, expensive, like white flowers with too much ambition. I may have misjudged you, she said. That was it, her version of a peace offering. Camilla hovered behind her arms, folded lips pressed tight. I didn't need your judgment, I said, or your apology. Vivienne's expression didn't change, but her voice dropped half an octave. You've made quite the name for yourself, Janelle. You've captured attention. I caught the shift. Not admiration, calculation. You're not proud, I said quietly. You're nervous. She stiffened. Don't be, I added. I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm just not shrinking anymore. Pause. And if that feels like violence, maybe you should ask why you're so threatened by my presence. Camilla stepped forward then. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said. I turned to face her fully. I've always been better than who you think I am. She looked away first. Brandon still stood in the middle, frozen. I didn't blame him anymore. I pitied him. He had the chance to choose something real, and he blinked. A car pulled up behind the limo, sleek, quiet, unexpected. I frowned. The back window rolled down. Rena leaned out, phone in hand. Vanessa just confirmed, she called softly. You're the cover story. Full spread. It drops Friday. Vivian heard. So did Camilla. Brandon didn't move. I didn't know they'd send someone tonight, I murmured to Rena. She shrugged. They were already watching. The sentence sat heavy in the air. They were already watching. Vivian finally spoke again. If you ever want to be part of something larger, I cut her off. I already am. The limo door opened. I slid inside. The leather was warm, familiar now. Mine. The door closed behind me, sealed like a vault. Outside, they stood frozen in that perfect tableau, the mother, the sister, the man who couldn't move. Stuck in a world that taught them power was something you inherited, not something you built. The engine hummed. The car pulled away. I didn't cry, didn't look back, not once. They weren't worth the wait. Not anymore. 3 days later, I sat on a rooftop in Tribeca. Wind tangled my hair. My coffee went cold beside me. I didn't touch it. The magazine lay open in my lap. Page 22. There I was, suit sharp, eyes forward. Headline bold, she didn't ask for a seat. She built the table. I didn't smile, not right away. It wasn't joy I felt. It was release. I'd spent so long trying to fit into rooms I should have owned. So long quieting myself to make space for people who never once made room for me. And now there was space. But more than that, there was clarity. Brandon hadn't reached out. Vivian sent a single email, congratulations. Well played. I deleted it without opening. Pause. Rena called that night. You okay? Yeah, I said. I actually am. We didn't talk long. She didn't ask for details. She already knew. I turned off my phone, let silence sit beside me for once. It felt good, like still water after a storm. I wasn't angry anymore, not bitter, just done shrinking. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right. It's becoming someone they can't access, because you finally stopped asking for their keys. Pause. Have you ever walked away from a room that never saw your worth? Tell me about it in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And if this one made you breathe a little deeper, subscribe for more. We've got plenty more stories where this came from. The ones they never saw coming. But we did.